Welcome to Keep Hustling, where we are going past the why to get to the how. I'm your host, the always hustling Aaron Gordon, aka NY Risk Advisor, aka Mr. #Keep Hustling. In this podcast, we will be diving deep into the professional and personal successes of our guests to find out how they hustled through the most difficult times in their life and their development to achieve the success they've gotten to today. So buckle up for what hopes to be an amazing ride. Let's get to it. Welcome to Keep Hustling with my guest, Gabe Marans. Thanks for being here, Gabe. How you doing?
Hey, all good. Aaron, I appreciate you having me on. I was just fixing my light as we were dialing right in.
You know, technology is a great thing. We're trying. We'll see what happens. Hopefully it works out. And, we're trying something new here. We're trying to inspire others to keep hustling through their lives. I think that one of the things that I do like social media. I love what we get to see. I've been inspired by it. But I find that very often, even the people that talk about their struggles, we see them from a place of like where they're sitting now. So we're trying to realize that even the people, the CEOs of all the companies have had those struggles and had to hustle or keep hustling through somewhat challenging moments. Hopefully we have some fun with that along the way. So let's jump right into it. What do we need to know about the upbringing of Gabe Marans that put him in the chair in the awesome office with the great view that we're seeing right now?
I appreciate that. You know, I think that when you asked me the question right before we went live, you know, it kind of made me almost self-conscious about how unremarkable in many ways the life that I've lived is and the life that I continue to live. And, you know, I guess shameless plug for you. I think the theme really is just hustle. It's a matter of building up and encouraging resilience, which is something that I was born with, but certainly an environment that I was raised in by my parents and the schools that I went to. And it was really, it's about hustling. It's about moving forward. It's about finding the things that make you passionate about life. And so when I talk about my upbringing, I'm New York born and bred. I'm now living in the suburbs, but even my son's fourth generation born in New York, which is where we met, Aaron, for the first time.
You grew up in New York or New Jersey?
Born in New York. Parents moved to Teaneck in Bergen County.
I just want to be clear to the listeners.
We got to be clear to the listeners.
You're not born and bred New York. I am born and bred New York, Upper East Side. You had a backyard and had suburban life. So I'm just throwing that out there.
Listen, the number of hours I've wasted debating this point unsuccessfully, of course, my friends will all point out, by my true born and bred New Yorkers. Yes, that's true. But
okay.
But I did go to school in the city, right? I did bus into the city. I did go to NYU right after, or for college, after taking a gap year between high school and college. I lived in Israel and studied in a yeshiva for a year. And then I lived in the city. So the reality is I spent most of my life in New York. And even when I was in New Jersey, I was always facing east.
Okay, fine. That's fine. So anyway, we digressed, but I just wanted to clear the air here.
But it plays, in many ways, it plays into my sense of upbringing. And so I was raised in a traditional Jewish household. You know, I was raised in a family that encouraged learning and curiosity. When we would have our Friday night Shabbat dinners together as a family, there was no question that was off limits. You know, the Encyclopedia Britannica was pulled off the shelf and splayed on the table, overlapping with the dictionary.
Yeah, us too. It's disturbing. Something our kids will never experience, though. I don't know. I'm trying, but
you could try to replicate it, but there's it's too instantaneous, and you know those lulls allowed for great debate. And so I'm one of four. I'm the oldest, so that was a unique position to be in, and we all kind of followed the same path. Went to Yavne Academy for elementary school in Paramus, New Jersey. Ramaz for high school, and then we all went to school for college in the Northeast. You know, this is a nice segue into professional, and then I'll pause and catch my breath. When I was in college at NYU, I interned at the company that I'm still with. And so when we talk about linear upbringing, you know, I have spent now 15 years at the same place, which far outranks the amount of time that I spent anywhere else in my life.
Which is super uncommon. I think it's interesting because you mentioned two things there that some people might not put in the same sentence. And that is that you learned the curiosity, that no question was off limits, to constantly explore your intellectual curiosity and all of those things that you were facing and question the status quo. And I know, I mean, I know that there's a lot of debate there. I can feel it. And I think I've seen some of it or experienced some of it firsthand. But at the same time, your grit or your hustle has been linked to one place professionally, which is interesting because a lot of people in our generation and nowadays think that in order to be curious, in order to find your passion, you need to constantly, or not constantly, but at least explore other things. And that you found ways to be continuously inspired at the same place. So what is that like?
The two things, it's an amazing call out because the two things are not only related, but almost sequential in their relationship. So what I mean by that is that I had no interest in going into the business that I went into. So I'm a vice chairman at Savills. We're a tenant rep office leasing advisory service. So essentially companies hire us. We advise them on making strategic real estate decisions. Now, this is not a career path as much as I love it today that I grew up even being aware of. And the job that I wanted to get into was actually investment banking. And the job that I had lined up coming out of school was at Bear Stearns. And the only reason I ended up at the company that I'm with is because Bear Stearns and my job for the summer disappeared overnight. I ended up interning at the company that I'm with 15 years later. So the question is curiosity and hustle and grit. Well, I found myself in a career path that I never expected. I asked questions. I was introspective about it. I started to think about what are the things that are really engaging me? What are the things that are making me passionate, obsessed with this business? And those are the things that I focused on that allowed me to persevere, which we now call in retrospect is hustle or grit. But in the moment, I was just trying to identify and focus on the things that made me excited. And I got excited because I was asking questions and I was curious.
I don't know the answer to this. Did you always have the same kind of job? I assume that at that firm, there's like analysis, sales. Has it always been the same kind of, I know obviously you've represented some of the largest companies in the world, but meaning has that pivot happened? Have you found a calling in a certain part of the business, or how does that kind of lay itself out?
Yeah, I think your question in some ways is okay, Gabe, fine. Like let's say that we believe that everything you've just shared is true, that you find what you're obsessed about and you just kind of use that as a trigger to fuel just reaching a different level of passion. Well, then you've been in the same role kind of for the last 15 years. The reality is what we do is not only different year to year, but day to day. And so I started as an associate, as an intern, mostly supporting senior partners, and that really takes you through all the different components of the business. Certainly, it touches on financial analyses and sophisticated consulting and project management skills. It's about learning relationships throughout the industry, learning the ins and outs of deals, how to manage accounts, how to leverage the resources of the company. And so fast forward several years, and now I have a team that I help manage and mentoring some of the junior partners to continue to grow and expand, thus allowing me to focus on whatever else I'd like to focus on. I'm involved in different initiatives internally as well, a lot of which has to do with leadership and mentorship. And I think that comes from a place of, just gratitude for the people who reached out when I was coming up, and just trying to kind of pay it back into the system.
I've also been at a little bit different because I work in a family business, as you know, but I've also been at the same place my entire career. But do you think that I would assume that when you meet younger people at the company or in the business, that them knowing that you start at the bottom and are now the vice chairman is somewhat inspiring to them.
A little bit of Drake, started from the bottom, now I'm
exactly,
here.
Exactly. We're just gonna go for that. Got to give Canada a little shout out every once in a while. But I feel like a lot of people, very often younger people, and I assume some of our listeners will be earlier on in their career and they're going to be thinking about how they can further their career. I think many people think that it's impossible to climb one rung at a time. And obviously you have to have a certain level of grit and a certain level of intelligence and a certain level of, I would probably say luck somewhere in there. But I have to imagine that you inspire the younger people at the firm more than others because you're like, without even saying it, like I actually did it. I didn't jump every 2 years to a higher position. Then I became the vice chairman here and now I'm advising it. Like at this very company, I was literally in your chair.
I hope so. I hope that's the case. It's a challenge because I want to be as approachable as I can be, and there is something I think that just gets harder as you get more advanced in your career, which is like the amount of time between you and people first starting gets bigger, and there could be a little bit of an unrelatability there. So I hope that that's not the case. I hope that I can be relatable in some level, and it's like what I said earlier in our conversation, I'm sure you can attest to it on some level also. Like the only thing that I'm doing differently is working harder. And I'm working harder because I focus on the things that I love and that I'm passionate about. It's really almost that simple. Anybody could do it. If there's a will, there's a way. To quote the great Theodore Herzl, right? If you will it, it is no dream.
I think that's true. And it's interesting because a lot of people think that it's the opposite. A lot of people see the CEO level and say, oh, wait, well, they get to vacation more. But I agree with you 100%. I think that at a certain point in a person's career, it clicks to them. And when you find that passion and that inspires your hustle, you end up working harder, but it doesn't feel harder. It's almost like when you're earlier on in the internship stage without clocking in, but you can clock in at 9 and clock out at 5. And yet later, I know the hour that you get into your office. I know the hour that I get into my office, and I can imagine. And we both have families and little kids. And it's almost like you would think that at a certain point you would slow down. But when you find that passion and you find that hustle and that grit, it makes you want to work harder, not take your foot off the gas.
That definitely resonates. There was this was 10 years ago, well before I had kids. It was a late Thursday night, and one of the senior partners was walking out, and he says to me, "I'm jealous of you. You don't have anybody who's waiting on you to come home." And it was 10 years ago. I was already married, and so there was actually someone waiting for me to come home, but it wasn't kids, and I could pull in the late night oil and burn the late night oil, and I now say variations of that to the younger people on the team because it is an advantage. But there's a very clear trend among those who are successful and those who aren't, and that is you do get better with doing more with less over time. And so you can't have it all. You can't both be a fully present dad and also fully committed to a professional career. But there are moments where you can be. So if you're at the school play, you can be 100% committed dad, and then you walk out and then you're back to being 100% committed professional. And so I just find that in many ways I'm on this seesaw where I'm never going to be perfectly balanced, but that's okay. I just got to get to the other side.
I've gotten some heat from saying that I don't think that there is anything called a work-life balance. People have, I think like my greatest social media engagement was from haters when I said that there's no such thing as a work-life balance. I often quote my father.
I remember that.
I often quote my father of blessed memory, who said, my wife and I, the only disagreement about the quote is whether he said it to her the first time he met her or the second. I think it was the first. And he said, Aaron's going to work with us. He'll never be able to have what some people call a real vacation, which I used to look at that as a negative. But I think that when you work hard enough, and like you said, you can be a fully present dad or a fully present husband. Yeah, I assume, like me, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, that I have this thing where I try to clear my inbox before I go to sleep at night.
I'm inbox zero
right.
too.
A lot of people tell me that's insane or that's not a balance. My answer to that is, like you, I have little kids. My daughter's 12. So it's actually becoming harder now because she stays up later sometimes than I do. And my youngest child is 10 months old. That doesn't mean that I have to clear it before I leave my office. I could leave my office, spend 2 or 3 hours with my family at home when I get home, and then clear my inbox. So I think that people just have this, people often confuse hustle with lack of presence. And I love what you said about doing more with less, because I think also when you realize how precious that time is, you can do a lot more with it. And also, I mean, we have the Sabbath and holidays, which forces us to kind of turn it off a little bit. So I think that's obviously an advantage. I want to if it's okay, I want to pivot a little bit more. So you started at the bottom, quote unquote, at your company, which the name I always pronounced incorrectly, Savills. Did I get it right?
Savills.
Savills.
Yeah. It's we have an ongoing gag. We had a stop the stranger on the street. How do you pronounce the sign? Type of thing. So you're
0%. Like let's change it to Marans, and I'll be 0%. Very happy.
But that Savills for all those who actually are trying to do it.
So what at Savills? I got it. What was the moment when it just clicked? What was that pivotal moment? If you could think back in your career where you said, this is what I'm going to do, and this is how I'm going to do it to become the chairman or the vice chairman, however you want to look at it.
I was definitely surprised at the beginning to see certain things working. It's not to say that I was lacking confidence, but there were certain things that happened early in my career that I had not expected to happen, all positive. Business that I was involved with, the opportunity to work on deal teams with senior professionals and align myself with them well before I probably earned it. But the moment I think that really opened in many ways my eyes happened like very, very close together. So I'll mention actually two, if that's okay. The first is the first time someone hired me all on my own. I walked into a client meeting. I had some materials. I thought it was going to be a casual conversation. It was a warm introduction. And they brought in the executive team and I had to pitch, and then I won the business. And I found out a couple of weeks later after the typical follow-ups and courting process. So it wasn't dramatic in the sense I walked out of the boardroom, yes, I won. But that did happen. And I remember thinking to myself, actually, I said, what kind of client would hire me? Are they a client I want to have? Right. And I killed it for this group. And I'm not going to mention who they are because I don't even know to this day that they realize this. And when they asked about my experience, I, of course, talked about my actual experience, but I wasn't part of the deal winning team. And so that was the first light bulb that went up over my head where I'm like, I can do this. People believe in me. And the second thing that happened was I was recognized by the real estate board in New York as their rookie of the year. So it's an honor that they award once a year, and it's a fairly competitive process. And I went up against some pretty heavy hitters that were kind of in my class, and it was a big luncheon when they announced the winner. And I had actually notified, I knew I was nominated. I notified the committee that I wasn't going to be able to make it to the luncheon. It was for like 1,200 people because I had a pitch. And they called my boss and said, you have to reschedule the pitch. He won. I didn't realize this at the time. So I sit down at the lunch and they call my name. And that was the start of all the social media because after that, I started writing some op-eds that led to LinkedIn. And that has just fed on itself. And those two things are both the same story with different substance. It was when other people with voices louder than my own said very clearly, hey, we believe in you. And that fueled my self-confidence.
That's great. It would have been classic if you didn't show up to that lunch and they called your name or you won, but we couldn't have it that you weren't there. So we gave it to the next guy. And then you said something a couple minutes ago, which I want to dig a little deeper on. You said that you were in the room on deals sooner than you earned it, or that you feel sooner than you earned it. So two things have to happen there. One is your mentors or superiors have to put you in that room. And the second is you have to thrive in that environment. Why do you think they put you in the room when you didn't deserve it? Looking back at it.
I found ways to add value in ways that the senior partners may not have expected. Okay, I'll give you an example. Something as simple as taking notes in a meeting and circulating a to-do list after a meeting is the simplest thing you can do that seems incredibly low value. But when you start doing that, you will be brought into internal planning meetings over and over and over again because you are organizing them.
And because they know that you're not just sitting there and listening, but they know that, oh, hey, who's that guy that sends those emails with those notes? And it puts your name in the inbox.
I showed up every day ready to go. I wore a white shirt, a tie, except for Fridays in the summer, and a very baggy Joseph A. Banks suit for like 3 for $20 that I got. And every single day I would show up, and if they needed someone to sub in on a showing, they tapped me and I went. And so I developed this reputation as someone who was very trustworthy, would follow through, and was organized. And that is a player that is a net positive and is never a net negative. And so if you were in a neutral situation, you wouldn't look at it and say, what's the downside of having Gabe in the room? And so that kind of added to it. And through that, I worked on some very large accounts, some of the largest law firms in the world, some of the largest Fortune 100 companies in the world. And it gave me the basis for experience that I'm still leaning on today. It's also one other thing as I'm talking through this, like I started my career in the last recession. So I'm the, people who did that are the youngest of the old generation, because there's a before and after. Leaning on experience to understand how to navigate around a downturn is proving invaluable in this environment.
That point, I'm going to get back to, I think that is spot on. And I think that getting thrown into the deep end, I think that the current environment, especially in real estate, we were talking about this before we went on air, especially in the seat that you sit in, the A players and the B players are really, really getting separated. And I think that just to go back to one of the other points you made, because I think it's super important, especially for those starting out in their careers and trying to figure out how to find that hustle, organization is underrated. Being organized in your life, people make fun of me because my calendar, and you're probably the same way, the most successful people that I know have the world's most organized calendar. That doesn't mean I haven't gotten to the extreme like some friends of mine that schedule in
our date nights
calendared, but I haven't calendared in like phone calls with my family. I haven't gotten to that because I usually see them at night, but like I have people that actually schedule their evenings when they get home, not date nights, but you know what I'm saying? Like actually how they're going to organize that. I'm not there yet, but it's funny because people think that the more success you obtain, your life is just going to be free. And I find that the best way to stay, like, there's nothing that gets me more energized than I do it on Sunday for the whole week. And then I do it every night before I go to sleep, looking at my calendar for the next day. When I have like almost nothing scheduled, you could say that's an easy day because I'm still getting quote unquote paid for that work. Like it doesn't, when I have a full week, it's like, let's do it. Let's less coffee. And I think that people who are not organized early on, it's really hard to pick it up. So I think it's super interesting that I imagine that now you probably have people in those meetings that take the notes, but you probably also still find yourself either physically or mentally taking the same notes that you did early on.
I find that I will still often be the only person in a room taking notes when I will be like the most senior person by a long shot. I have a very disciplined note-taking system that I can cross-reference across different dates, across different materials. My calendar is up to date. I'm trying to free my mind to think more creatively and less administratively. And that just requires leaning on tools, both people and technology. So I'm with you. There's a limit, though. I'm 100% with you on that too. About that there's I would say to a client, hey, can we talk at 2 p.m. But I probably am not going to schedule a Zoom with my best friend to catch up at 2 p.m. Right? So there's probably a bit of a nuanced difference between family friends versus the professional.
Just because I'm digging in on this doesn't have to do with the podcast, but the listeners I think will enjoy. What is your piece of technology or lack thereof for note taking?
Good Notes. So great app. I take it on the iPad, and you can write, and there's handwriting recognition. And I've kept digital notes now for the last 6 years. I have it mirrored across, of course, my iPhone and my iPad. So anywhere I am, I could look up and see what I'm doing. And I've gotten into the habit of basically dictating my day. So if I get an unexpected call, I'll take some notes on the pad. This conversation, for example, right? Because there might be a point where I'm like, when did we record that episode? And so I would look at my calendar. And so sometimes I'll even go back and add things to my calendar in order to have a record of when they might have happened.
Good note. So this is not sponsored, but if you want to sponsor, I'll reach out to Gabe, and he will probably be a great spokesperson for Good Notes. Your story is so unlike the average story that we hear. I'm super inspired because me sitting in the same chair for the last 15, 20 years is not as, I guess, the kind of more run of the mill. But it's just remarkable to me that you literally went from intern to vice chairman. And it's like, I would assume that you probably got offers to leave, and people probably recruited you, and people probably told you were insane at a certain point. Like, what are you doing sticking it out? Like, you could get a signing bonus of X to switch to a competitor. So what made you like just stick it out there? Was it, and don't say I'm gonna help you avoid any corporate problems. Don't say I just love this corporation. Like, I just love everything about this company, because that's lame.
Listen, I think if anything is great and truly great, then it becomes boring real fast. Companies are made of people, and it's the people that make these companies interesting. And this is a company that I love, and the people who I work here with, I do love. So with that disclaimer out of the way, of course, I think there have been a lot of people over the years who have told me that I am out of my mind. I shouldn't be doing this. The first among those, love you, Mom, but it is you, Mom, where for the first few years of my career, she was begging me to leave and go to graduate school. Granted, I joined commercial real estate brokerage during the last downturn, and our compensation structure here is 100% commission. And so or at least it was then.
Did she know that?
It's a little bit more. She did know that. And so, naturally, the Jewish mama bear didn't want to have her son starving out on the streets of New York. And so I was very fortunate, though, because I also refused financial help from them. I'd raid the kitchen every time I'd go home. But
and the
I wouldn't take money.
Gotta be laundry detergent.
Laundry detergent, I'd like pawn like the china on the streets just to afford rent, but I wouldn't take money from them. But what was wild about it is I survived because I'd actually made a great trade in the stock market. This is like almost can't believe this story. My senior year at NYU, I had a roommate. He was a year behind, fellow Ramaz grad. He had worked at Macquarie, the Australian investment bank, the summer before. As the recession starts to settle in, he turns to me and he says, during recessions, the government invests in infrastructure. They build roads and they employ people. Macquarie's infrastructure fund. I look it up. It's trading at $1. I had about $5,000 left to my name. I put it into the stock, and it went up to $20 over the next few years. So a 20x over 5,000. Now, I sold a lot over the years. I did not capture anywhere close to that, but that kept me afloat in the early years. So I was able to fully Heisman my mom and many of the others who were trying to preach reason.
What I think is interesting also there, which is another part of hustle, is you didn't tell me he was an idiot. I mean that seriously. Like, how many people will take their last $5,000 and trust their roommate? Now, obviously, that's how Facebook was started and things like that. But like, how many people don't do that?
So there are a lot of things about my life now that I don't think I would have said about myself even 15 years ago. One of those things, which is very clear, is I am very clearly extremely comfortable with risk. Okay, I'm in a commission job. I've made big bets in the stock market. On the other hand, I hate gambling. Like, I hate going to a casino. Like, the odds are stacked against me. So it's not like.
But it's calculated risk. You'll bet on yourself.
It's calculated risk. It's weighing risk. Why would I ever go into a deal with the house against me? Like, unless I'm paying for the entertainment. Like, why would I do that? So anyway, and so like I've realized now that I actually love risk. I love taking measured risk. But it's not something I ever would have considered before. And it's stories like these that I think kind of illustrate.
There was a guy who was in my grade in Ramaz, who I'm hoping to have on the podcast one day, who was one of the OG Bitcoin guys. Like, OG. And everyone asked me, like, what is the one that got away? The one that got away was when I started my career and I was literally a summer intern here. He goes, we got to find a way to insure this thing called Bitcoin. And the insuring it never would have worked because of the way that the asset but he said to me, he had started a company and it was one of the original Bitcoin wallets. And he goes, hey, listen, I'm going to get you started. I'm going to give you like 1/10 of a Bitcoin. I'm like, that's why this is stupid. It's not $1. It's 1/10 of something. And he started me in a wallet in 2009, 2008 or 2009. And the funny part about talking about calculated risk is this guy's life became Bitcoin. And when he got married, or when he was settling down, his future fiance at the time, or wife, said, this is way too risky. This is just way too risky. And at the time, obviously, you're talking about he got married in 2020. So life was pretty good for a guy who ended up moving to, he moved somewhere to mine Bitcoin. It'll come to me. But anyway, he ended up cashing out of a significant portion of his portfolio. And he said to his wife, listen, here's the deal. Whatever the number is, here's a number that I'm putting in the bank. Find the financial advisor, whoever you want to handle this. But you can never say anything to me about risk. The rest, like, this will take care of us. And I'm going to mess around with it the rest of the way. And so I just think that people who take those calculated risks, but more importantly, bet on themselves. So it's nice you made the investment, but that wouldn't have carried you if you hadn't bet on yourself in a commission position. It just allowed you to do that, but you still have to bet on yourself and hold it out in the commission position. So that's oh gosh, your story is so good. So good.
Yeah. See, and you think that it's good, and I think that it's like the most boring one-dimensional story there is. But listen, the reality is also, what else was I supposed to do? There were no jobs. Forget about a sub 4% unemployment rate. Like there were no jobs. Nobody my year graduated. That's why everybody is $200,000 in debt, because everybody went to law school and doesn't have a job now. Still $200,000.
That is the point of this whole enterprise, is that people, I think that it's lost. And that's like a great way to segue to our ending, is that what was I supposed to do? Nobody says that anymore, or we don't hear about that. And at the end of the day, as you said, grit, I call it hustle. If you just keep hustling and stay at it, not to sound super corny on the Keep Hustling podcast, but that's what you're saying. What else were you supposed to do? There's a lot of things you could have done. A lot of things you could have felt sorry for yourself. You could have gone and took a different path that didn't work, but you said, like, I saw a little bit of success here and I'm going to stay at it. So I really, really appreciate that. And you definitely inspired my hustle today. We have a closing tradition on the Keep Hustling podcast, and that is we ask our guests to end with telling us about their either lifetime or current favorite inspirational, motivational quote. So what is that for Gabe Marans?
All right. So I'm not going to run you through the full rendition, and I'm going to give you two, because my true favorite, and I was early to this, but I see this darn quote everywhere, so I feel like it's ruined it, is Teddy Roosevelt's Man in the Arena piece. Love Teddy, read many of his biographies, great Ken Burns documentary also on the family, but the Man in the Arena, about being bloodied and not caring what others who aren't in the arena care about, very much resonates with me. But I'm going to actually give you, and I find it inspiring, but it's really more of a life lesson, is a quote from the Testament, actually, the Old Testament, where it's talking about what is more important, because we're on this earth once and we are judged for who we are and how we conduct ourselves. And it's important to always remember Tov Shem, Mishem and Tov, that a good name is better than good oil, or reputation over wealth. And it's something that I think about every day, and is the bedrock behind all of my decisions. People want to work with people who do right, who hold themselves to a high ethical and moral standard. Those are the people who I find operate at a different layer. And so for me, that may as well be on my license plate and be stamped on tattoo in the small of my back, but Tov Shem, Mishem and Tov.
Gabe, thank you. You set me up. I don't know if you know how I close the podcast. Probably not, but you teed me up perfectly. So again, thank you for being here. To our listeners, remember, do well by doing good, and always keep hustling. All right, hustlers, that brings us to the end of another fantastic episode. Thank you for listening. The listeners are the most important part of this show. If you like what you heard, please leave us a review wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Your feedback means the world to us and helps us reach more listeners. Plus, be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you never miss an episode. We have some amazing guests and topics lined up for you, and we don't want you to miss out. And finally, if you have any suggestions, comments, or even just want to say hello, please feel free to reach out to us on all social media platforms. We are Keep Hustling Pod on Instagram, X, Facebook, and LinkedIn. We would love to hear from you to continue the conversation. Thanks again for tuning in and supporting our podcast. We truly appreciate each and every one of you. Until next time, stay curious, stay hungry, and keep hustling.